Hey guys, I'm Papa Pete, and welcome to today's episode of the 125. The 125 is my YouTube program that is all about the original 125 games that were released for the Intellivision System between 1979 and 1989. Now, it's a bit of a different type of internet show in the fact that each episode consists of more than one video. You have this video, which is a review and history video about the game, and then finally you have some gameplay videos, at least one, which shows uncut gameplay of me playing a complete game, just basically to see how it all comes together. And today's episode is PGA Golf. So sit back and let's take a look at today's episode. Before starting today's episode, I'd like to give a special thank you to the 125's official sponsor, IntellivisionCollector.com. Intellivision Collector is your one-stop for anything that you need for your Intellivision collection. With over 730 items currently listed on the site, you'll find not only lots of games, but systems and hardware, as well as repair parts, things like power and main boards, system shells, RF adapters, and even controller rebuild kits. Intellivision Collector is also currently in negotiation with several of the major players in the Intellivision homebrew community, so hopefully, one day soon, it'll be the primary location where you can find all the classic as well as the newest releases from all Intellivision homebrew creators. The site has had many recent additions and is updated regularly, so be sure to check out IntellivisionCollector.com. PGA Golf was released by Mattel Electronics on November 5th, 1980. It was released alongside the exact same day as the Electric Company Word Fun game. It was the 7th game released in the Sports Network, and it was the first sports game to allow for 4 players. Like most games back at that time, Mattel had contracted APH Technological Consulting to produce the game. The lead programmer was Scott Bishop.
Over the years, I've played some of the most challenging golf courses in the world, including this one, Intellivision PGA Golf. From tee to green, the gameplay is incredibly realistic. With Atari Golf, on the other hand, the gameplay is rather simplistic, and their course, not quite up to par. If you compare these two games, I think you'll find that Intellivision plays more like the real thing. Intellivision from Mattel Electronics.
There weren't very many golfing console video games released prior to PGA Golf, but a couple that were released are the very creatively named Computer Golf, that was for the Magnavox Odyssey 2, and also Golf, the most known one for sure, for the Atari VCS. Like I said before, these had very similar game styles, but they just didn't capture the space or the distance of real golf. Now, even less appealing than these two golf games, Computer Golf and Golf for the Atari VCS, was Pro Golf for the Apple II. And all it did was it took keyboard inputs to make calculations. You could enter your club number, the strength of your shot, and the computer would recreate and represent your shot on the screen. It wasn't very much fun to look at, that's for sure. Now, like George Plimpton said in the commercial earlier, then along came PGA Golf, which introduced not only the PGA license, but different gameplay aspects which were further developed and integrated into even more golfing games well into the future after this game's release. Now, I'm sure that you're all aware of how to play golf, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but let's have a brief recap. In essence, golf is a game where you hit a ball, it's called a stroke, and you're trying to hit it from an area at the start, called the tee, into the hole, which is hundreds of yards away, in as few shots or strokes as possible. Your score is kept over a number of holes. In most golf games, that's over 9 holes or over 18 holes. And in PGA Golf, it's a 9-hole course. Now, although we did have game club choice in the Apple II version, Pro Golf, PGA Golf was the very first game to introduce it into a console golf game. And it introduced the choice of 9 different clubs to use. Now, of these 9 clubs, 2 of them are actually only used in very specific situations. For example, the number 1 wood, or the driver, can only be used from the tee if you want. It's the longest hitting club, and it's the only situation where you can use it. Again, when your first shot is called from the tee. So you can only use it there, although you don't have to always use it there. The other specialized club is the putter. When you're on the green, which is the shaded area around the hole, you can see it on the course here, you have to use your putter. It's automatically selected for you, and it's the only club that you can use in that situation. Now this leaves you 7 other clubs to choose from. There are 2 other woods, and there's 5 other irons. The woods are built for distance and power, but they sacrifice finesse and control. And irons are the exact opposite, giving you more control, more finesse, but they sacrifice distance. I said there were 2 different woods. They're the number 3 and the number 5 wood. And the 5 irons you have are the 3 iron, the 5 iron, the 7 iron, the 9 iron, and finally the wedge. But more on that control and the finesse of using irons and the power of using clubs later on when I get into game control. The main screen view in PGA Golf is an overhead view of the individual hole that you're on, where you can clearly see the fairway, the green, the tee area, your ball with the marker of your golfer standing beside it, the different hazards, and also up in the top left-hand corner is a view of your golfer as it prepares for a swing. Now this view of the golfer in the upper left-hand corner became an absolute fixture in so many golf games that were created over the next 20 years after this one introduced it. Now I mentioned in the overhead view that you could clearly see the hazards on the hole. Well, there are 3 main types of hazards plus the rough which surrounds the fairway. First one I'm going to talk about is the water hazard. Water clearly is the blue area that's on the screen, and if you hit your ball into the water, you lose a stroke, you get a 1-stroke penalty, plus you get to reshoot either from where you originally shot from or by the closest piece of land right before the ball started over top of the water. It's your choice when you hit it to the water. The other thing that main type of hazard is the sand trap. The sand traps are yellow on the screen, and they're just very difficult to hit from. We'll talk more about that when we get into game control later on, but you have to choose certain clubs, and you really sacrifice a lot of distance. Now, I said about the rough. The rough is the area all around the fairway, and it's like a tannish brown. And again, it's very difficult to hit out of the rough. But most importantly, in the rough, you'll also find trees. And these trees are the only real random feature of each hole. Each hole is the same, but the trees are placed differently every time you play a hole. And it's, like I said, it's quite challenging not only to get out of the rough, but when you have trees, you have to go over them, under them, or around them, or they'll really mess up your shot. Overall, the screen really does capture a full golf hole. Yes, you never do get to see the entire course all at one time, but that's a small thing when you think about how much of an improvement the graphics in this game were back at the time. It really is a fantastic improvement. Now the sounds in PGA Golf, I'm going to tell you right now, are pretty much non-existent. Yes, there's a whoosh as you swing your club, and it makes a noise when you hit a tree or when the ball falls into the cup. But other than that, the only other real sounds are if you do manage to get a par or a birdie on a hole or under par, you do get that typical Intellivision applause and cheer that you hear in so many other games. But other than those sounds right there, it's almost silent. So the sounds, certainly in PGA Golf, are nothing exciting. Now, game controls where PGA Golf truly stands out. It introduced so many different concepts which were used on all kinds of other games going into the future. In order to control where you shoot your ball, you have a white bar that's beside the ball on the course. And you can rotate that and aim it in any one of the 16 different directions on your gamepad. You aim it by actually hitting in the direction that you want to aim. It doesn't rotate, it goes directly to the position that you hit on the gamepad. And one thing very important to remember, think of it as like the profile as you're standing beside the ball. And the golfers in PGA Golf are always right-handed. So if you're going to be hitting it forward, you're always going to be standing to the left of the ball. Kind of a hard concept. Won't really take very, very long for you to get used to that though. So now that you generally know how to aim, let's look at the 3 different factors that come into play when you're looking at club selection. And they are lie, distance, and elevation. The first one we want to look at is the lie. The lie is probably the easiest of the bunch as well. Of course, you have the best lie possible sitting on the fairway. You're wide open, you can shoot with whatever you want. Next, you have stuff like if you're lying in the rough or if you're lying in the sand. If you're lying in the rough, woods just aren't effective out of the rough. So you're going to want to choose an iron. And maybe in the sand, not only do you want to choose an iron, but more specifically, you want to choose a wedge. Now, with these two types of lies, in the rough or in the sand, the irons are going to hit the ball with the same strength as a club that was 2 clubs lighter on the fairway. So take that into account when you select the club, and it also brings us into the next aspect that we want to look at, which is the distance. In PGA Golf, there are 3 different types of swings to choose from. You have your long swing, your medium swing, and your short swing. They're all controlled with the side buttons on the controller. If you use either top side button, that's a long swing. If you use the lower left-hand side button, that's a medium swing. So obviously, the lower right-hand side button is the short swing. Now, the average distance per club for all 3 different types of swings is shown in a chart in the manual, which I'll put up here. And you really should become quite familiar with this part of the manual in order to be the most effective at PGA Golf. One thing to remember is no matter what club you choose, the shortest swing of a higher club will always be a little bit longer than the hardest swing of a lower club. Now, the last element to keep in mind with club selection is elevation. You have 2 different types of clubs, remember? You have the irons and you have the woods. And the woods have a much higher ratio of distance to elevation. You hit the ball further before it goes up higher. And the irons do the exact opposite. They create more elevation earlier at the sacrifice of distance. These factors are, I can't tell you how important they are to take into consideration when you're dealing with hazards. For example, if you have to get up and out of sand traps like I talked about before, or out of the rough, or even more importantly, if you have to go over or around or even under trees. 9 irons and wedges are just great for getting that ball up into the air and over top of trees, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's no guarantee. The manual says that every tree, for whatever reason, is 18.7 meters high, and at the end of the day, all you're going to be able to do is it's going to take a lot of trial and error to figure out when you could choose which club to get up and over a tree, or maybe you're at the base of a tree to keep it down low and stay under the tree. It's just going to take a lot of practice, but that's part of the fun of the gameplay. So the last factor about gameplay that I want to talk about is the swing itself. And this is the area that I believe PGA Golf is most revolutionary. It introduced something that was carried on for years and years, I've mentioned before, and that's the golfer up in the top left-hand corner. And the fact that you use the side buttons and watch the player swinging to control the direction of your swing. When you go to hit the ball in PGA Golf, you start your swing by pressing one of the 4 side buttons, or one of the 3 different side buttons. You can either take a long shot, a medium shot, or a short shot. And when you hit that button the first time, the golfer in the top left-hand corner starts to bring his golf club back the distance according to the button you selected. Then when he starts forward, you have to hit the button a second time. The goal is to hit that button just before the golf club hits the ball. Now, if you hit the button a little bit too early, you can hook the ball. And if you hit the button too late, you can slice the ball, which is wonderful when it happens by accident, but frankly, you can also use that to your advantage and actually hook it on purpose or slice it on purpose to help dealing with hazards. Another factor to remember is that the button press that's registered is always the last one made until the swing is finished. In other words, if you hit the button the second time early and hook the ball, you could conceivably hit it again and maybe get it just right or even slice it. So you could turn a potential hook into a slice, but you can't do it the other way around. It's not the absolute second one that counts for the direction of the shot. It is the one that's hit last before the swing ends. Now, this method of hitting the ball in golf was used in just so many games of the future. It only had one other factor that was incorporated into it. In Intellivision, you actually picked the button whether you wanted a long, medium, or short, and they incorporated the strength of the shot, into the button presses as well. There are so many games that I played where you'd hit that button once to start your swing, you'd hit the button at the peak of your swing, and you could have overswings or underswings, and then you hit it again a third time, which would deal with the hook or slice. And all it was is they took the original concept of PGA Golf and expanded on it a little bit further. So it really does show how revolutionary PGA Golf was to the world of future golf games. I only played PGA Golf once back in the 1980s. It wasn't a game that my brother-in-law and I had. We just weren't into golf that much back then. We'd always go and pick some space game or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. Those are the games we preferred. And we didn't get this one, even though it was out for a long time. But, later on, I did get into golf games more when I got into university on the Commodore 64, and then I think on the PC, maybe the NES I played a little bit of golf on, and then most of all, the great PGA Golf Tour games by EA Sports on the Genesis. I just simply love those games. And PGA Golf, the Intellivision, it just can't compare with the technology that was presented in those games years later. But then again, when I go back and I look at it, what strikes me the most is just how much those games depended on the technology and the process, the gameplay process that was originally developed for PGA Golf. In 1981, I would have been blown away by the realism of this game. The graphics were very good, and the gameplay function was even better, to be quite honest. The sounds weren't very good, but I would have easily overlooked the sounds, because whatever, they don't really contribute to the game itself that much. But I do have some serious doubts about the potential longevity of playing that game, because it was the same 9 holes over and over again. Yes, the trees moved around some, but there really wasn't that much variation there. It would have become repetitive very quickly because of these limitations. You know what, though?
What?
It was still a fantastic foundation for all sorts of different golf games to come in the future. For all of these reasons, I'm going to give PGA Golf by APH Technological Consulting a 6 out of 10 rating. Well guys, that's it for today's episode of the 125 PGA Golf. Before I go, I'd like to thank one more time the official sponsor of the 125, IntellivisionCollector.com. Be sure to check out www.IntellivisionCollector.com if you need anything for your Intellivision collection. Games, systems, repair pieces, anything you need. Talk to Luke, tell him Papa Pete sent you. Anyway guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the 125. Take care.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't grown up by the age of 50,